The maintenance alarm's shrill cry echoed through the corridors of Nexus Prime, and Marcus Webb was running late. Again. His tool belt jangled against his hip as he jogged through the station's gleaming passages, dodging clusters of alien diplomats and interstellar merchants who filled the newly opened sectors. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate control, and his standard-issue jumpsuit stuck uncomfortably to his back. Sector 7, Junction 15, he muttered, checking his handheld scanner. The atmospheric recycling system had thrown another fault code, and if he didn't get it fixed within the hour, 3 levels of the station would be breathing recycled air that smelled like sulfur. Not exactly the impression humanity wanted to make in their first month as members of the Galactic Commerce Alliance. Marcus turned a corner sharply, his attention split between his scanner's readout and the maze-like layout of the station's newer sections. The impact came without warning, a collision that sent him stumbling backward, his scanner clattering across the polished floor. His shoulder protested where it had connected with something solid yet yielding, and for a moment, he was too disoriented to process what had happened. "Oh, hell, I'm sorry," he began, then stopped mid-sentence as his eyes focused on what, or rather, who, he'd run into. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen, even in his months working alongside dozens of alien species. Her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between deep purple and violet as she moved, like oil on water under starlight. Intricate patterns of silver traced along her high cheekbones and down her slender neck, not tattoos but something that seemed to pulse gently with its own light. Her hair fell in waves past her shoulders, a cascade of silver that caught the station's lighting and threw it back in prismatic fragments. But it was her eyes that made Marcus forget how to breathe. They were large and almond-shaped, filled with swirling galaxies of color, deep purples, silver starbursts, and something that might have been gold threading through it all. No visible pupils, yet he felt certain she was looking directly at him with an intensity that made his skin warm. "The fault is mine," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality with undertones that seemed to resonate in his chest. "I was not observing my path with proper care." Her accent was unfamiliar, each word precisely enunciated in a way that suggested Standard Galactic wasn't her first language. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting garment that shifted color with her skin, deep purples giving way to silver highlights that emphasized her distinctly feminine form. "No, I was the one not watching where I was going," Marcus insisted, bending to retrieve his scanner. When he straightened, she had moved closer, close enough that he caught her scent, something like rain on warm stone, with an underlying note that reminded him of ozone before a thunderstorm. She tilted her head, studying him with those mesmerizing eyes. "You are human," she observed, not a question but a statement filled with curiosity. "Guilty as charged," Marcus replied, managing a smile despite his discomfort at being so obviously alien to her. "Marcus Webb, maintenance engineer." "And you're?" "Zara Velton," she responded, and the way she said her name made it sound like music. "Of the Kytherian delegation." Kytherian. Marcus had heard the name in briefings but had never encountered one of their people before. The briefings had mentioned they were a diplomatic species, highly advanced, with complex social customs. What they hadn't mentioned was how breathtakingly beautiful they were, or how their presence could make the air feel charged with electricity. "I have not encountered a human before this moment," Zara continued, her head still tilted in that curious way. "Your people are fascinating." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that, she stepped even closer. Personal space seemed to be a flexible concept for Kytherians, apparently. Her eyes held his, and he found himself unable to look away, caught in those swirling depths like a ship in a cosmic storm. "May I?" she began, then seemed to reconsider her words. "It is customary among my people to properly greet new acquaintances." Marcus nodded, assuming she meant some sort of handshake or bow. He'd learned to be respectful of alien customs during his time on the station, even when they seemed strange to human sensibilities. What happened next, however, was far from anything he could have expected. Zara reached up with one graceful hand, her fingers longer and more slender than human proportions would suggest, each tipped with what looked like small crystals instead of nails. She placed her palm gently against his cheek, and Marcus felt a subtle tingling sensation, as if mild electrical current was passing between them. Then she leaned forward, bringing her face close to his neck, and he felt something cool and slightly rough brush against his skin just below his ear. It took his stunned mind a moment to process what had happened. She had extended her tongue and tasted him. The sensation was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Her tongue felt different from human anatomy, longer and with a texture that was both smooth and crystalline, as if it were made of living gemstone. The touch was cool but left a warm tingling in its wake, spreading down his neck and across his shoulders. Marcus stood frozen, his brain struggling to process what had just occurred. The logical part of his mind noted that many alien cultures had greeting customs that might seem strange to humans. The less logical part was entirely focused on the way his skin still tingled where she touched him, and how her closeness made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with his morning run through the station. Zara pulled back, and Marcus caught a glimpse of her tongue before it disappeared behind her lips, definitely not human, with a surface that seemed to sparkle like crushed diamonds. Her expression had changed, her swirling eyes wider now, holding what looked like surprise and something else he couldn't identify. "Oh," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, this is unexpected." "What's unexpected?" Marcus managed, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Was that some kind of greeting?" Zara's iridescent skin seemed to shift toward deeper purples, and if he didn't know better, Marcus would have said she was blushing. She took a step back, her hand moving to touch her throat in what appeared to be a nervous gesture. Yes, it is a greeting," she said, though something in her tone suggested there was more to it than that. "Among Kytherians, we taste to determine compatibility." "Compatibility for what?" Marcus asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Zara's eyes met his again, and in their depths he saw a mixture of embarrassment, wonder, and something that might have been panic. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to lean forward to hear her. "For bonding," she whispered. "What I have done, in my culture, it is how we choose our life mates." The words hit Marcus like a meteor strike. He blinked, certain he'd misunderstood. "Life mates? As in?" "Marriage," Zara confirmed, her skin now cycling through rapid color changes that definitely indicated distress. "By tasting you and finding your essence, compatible. I have essentially proposed marriage according to Kytherian custom." Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. In the space of 5 minutes, he'd gone from being a maintenance engineer running late for a repair job to being accidentally engaged to one of the most stunning beings he'd ever encountered. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. "And I'm guessing," he said slowly, "that saying, 'I accept,' isn't something I can just take back." Zara's expression grew even more troubled. "The tasting bond is significant. Once offered and accepted, and your biochemical response suggests acceptance, it cannot be easily dissolved." "My biochemical response?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect what she meant. His heart was still racing, his skin still tingling, and he felt drawn to her in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Humans," Zara said, her voice gaining strength as she seemed to find her composure, "are apparently very responsive to Kytherian bonding chemistry. More so than we anticipated." As the implications of her words sank in, Marcus realized that his morning had just become infinitely more complicated. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear his maintenance alarm still chirping, reminding him of his forgotten duties. But looking into Zara's mesmerizing eyes, watching the way worry and curiosity warred in their depths, he found that atmospheric recycling suddenly seemed far less important than understanding what had just happened between them. "So," he said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded, "what exactly does one do when they've accidentally gotten engaged to someone they met 30 seconds ago?" Zara's lips curved into what might have been a smile, revealing teeth that seemed to catch and reflect light like her crystalline tongue. "I believe," she said, "we must figure that out together. The atmospheric recycling system would have to wait." Marcus found himself sitting across from Zara in a quiet alcove of the station's observation deck, trying to process everything she just explained about Kytherian bonding customs. Through the massive viewport, stars wheeled slowly as Nexus Prime rotated, but Marcus barely noticed the cosmic display. His attention was entirely focused on the remarkable woman who had accidentally become his fiancée. "So the taste thing," he said, running a hand through his brown hair, "it's like a chemical analysis. You can actually determine compatibility through sampling someone?" Zara nodded, her skin cycling through softer purples now that she'd calmed down. "Kytherians evolved as empathic beings. Our tongues can detect pheromones, emotional states, even genetic markers that indicate psychological compatibility. It's why our marriages are so successful. We choose partners based on deep biochemical harmony, not just attraction." "And mine apparently lit up like a Christmas tree," Marcus said wryly. "Christmas tree?" Zara tilted her head in that endearing way he was already growing fond of. "Human expression. It means I gave off a lot of positive signals." Marcus leaned back in his chair, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. "So what happens now? Do we need to find some kind of Kytherian official to unengage us?" Something flickered across Zara's features, disappointment. Before she could answer, a deep voice resonated through the alcove. "That would be my department." Both Marcus and Zara turned to see a tall Kytherian male approaching their table. Where Zara was graceful and ethereal, this newcomer radiated authority and barely contained displeasure. His skin was darker than hers, more indigo than purple, with silver markings that formed intricate geometric patterns across his face and visible arms. His silver hair was pulled back in an elaborate style that spoke of high rank, and his clothing was formal, richly decorated with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. "Uncle Thane," Zara said, her voice carefully neutral as she rose from her seat. "I did not expect you so soon." "Clearly," Thane replied, his swirling eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made the human feel like a specimen under a microscope. "When the station's diplomatic sensors detected an unauthorized bonding initiation involving a member of our delegation, I came immediately." Marcus stood as well, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Marcus Webb, sir. I'm afraid this is all a misunderstanding." "I am Regent Thane Velton," the older Kytherian interrupted without taking the offered hand. "And I am well aware of what this is." His gaze shifted between Marcus and Zara. "The question is what we intend to do about it." "Uncle, please," Zara began, but Thane held up a hand to silence her. "Do you have any idea," he said to Marcus, "of the diplomatic complications you've created? Humans have been members of the Galactic Commerce Alliance for exactly 27 standard days. 27 days, and already we have an interspecies bonding incident that could set precedents for decades to come." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "With respect, sir, I didn't know what she was doing. In human culture, that would just be considered unusual behavior, maybe. Not a marriage proposal." "And therein lies the problem," Thane said, beginning to pace. "Cross-cultural contamination. The Alliance specifically warns against unsupervised contact between species with incompatible social frameworks, precisely to avoid situations like this." "We are not contaminated," Zara said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "And Marcus is not some dangerous pathogen to be avoided." Thane's expression softened slightly as he looked at his niece. "Zara, you are young and this is your first diplomatic assignment. You don't understand the implications." "I understand that you're treating this human like he's somehow unworthy of consideration," Zara interrupted, her skin flashing brighter purple. "The taste bond was genuine, uncle. His compatibility markers were unlike anything in our databases." Marcus looked between the two Kytherians, feeling increasingly like a prize being fought over rather than a person with his own agency. "Excuse me," he said firmly, "but I'm sitting right here. Maybe someone should ask what I think about all this." Both Kytherians turned to him, Thane with surprise and Zara with something that might have been gratitude. "You're right," Marcus continued. "I don't understand your customs, and I certainly didn't mean to create a diplomatic incident. But I'm not just going to stand here while you debate my fate like I'm not capable of making my own decisions. Thane studied him with new interest. And what decision would you make, human? Marcus glanced at Zara, taking in her anxious expression, the way her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. In the few hours since their collision, he'd learned more about interspecies relations than in all his previous time on the station. But more than that, he'd found himself genuinely intrigued by this remarkable woman who had literally tasted his soul and found it compatible with hers. I'd like to understand what this bonding thing actually means, he said. Not the political implications or the diplomatic complications, what it means for Zara and me. Thane's eyebrows rose, but he nodded slowly. Very well. In Kytherian culture, the taste bond is the first step in a courtship process that typically lasts one full cycle, roughly equivalent to 3 of your Earth days. During this time, the potential mates spend time together, sharing experiences and deepening their connection. At the end of the cycle, they undergo the final bonding ceremony or choose to dissolve the connection. And if they choose to bond? Marcus asked. Then they are mated for life, Zara said softly. Kytherians do not divorce, do not separate. The biochemical connection becomes permanent, and the two become, in many ways, part of each other. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine, though whether from fear or excitement, he couldn't say. That's intense. Which is why, Thane interjected, I am prepared to invoke diplomatic immunity and declare this bonding void. No harm done, no precedent set. You return to your maintenance duties, Zara continues her diplomatic work, and we all pretend this never happened. No, Zara said immediately, her skin flashing bright silver. Uncle, you cannot simply. I can and I will, Thane replied firmly. Unless. He paused, studying Marcus again. Unless the human wishes to formally request the 3-day courtship period. The alcove fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station systems. Marcus could feel both Kytherians watching him, waiting for his decision. Part of him knew the sensible choice was to walk away. He barely knew Zara, had never even considered the possibility of an interspecies relationship, and certainly hadn't planned on accidentally getting engaged during his morning maintenance rounds. But another part of him remembered the electric touch of her hand on his face, the way her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies, the genuine curiosity and kindness he'd seen in her when she'd explained her culture. There was something about her that called to him in a way he'd never experienced with anyone, human or otherwise. The 3 days, he said slowly. Would they be supervised? Thane's lips curved into what might have been a smile. Naturally. I cannot allow my niece to gallivant around the station unsupervised with a human, no matter how compatible you might appear to be. Uncle, Zara protested, but Marcus held up a hand. That's fair, he said. I wouldn't want to compromise her reputation or your family's standing. He looked directly at Zara. What I want to know is whether you want these 3 days. Not because of some accidental bond or diplomatic complications, but because you're curious about where this might lead. Zara's skin shifted through a cascade of colors, silver, gold, deep purple, then settling into a warm lavender that made her look almost luminous. Yes, she said. I find myself very curious about you, Marcus Webb. Your taste signature suggests a depth of character I have rarely encountered. And your reaction to our customs shows a flexibility of mind that is, attractive. Then it's settled, Marcus said, turning to Thane. I formally request the 3-day courtship period, with whatever supervision you deem appropriate. Thane nodded slowly. Very well. But understand, human, that I will be watching closely. Any sign that you are taking advantage of my niece's inexperience, any indication that you are not taking this bond seriously, and I will end this arrangement immediately. I understand, Marcus replied. But I have a condition of my own. Both Kytherians looked surprised. I want to learn about your culture, your customs, everything that this bonding process involves. But I also want Zara to learn about human customs. If we're going to explore this connection, it needs to be equal. She tastes my soul, I get to share my world with her. Zara's face lit up with something that could only be described as delight. I would very much like that, she said. Thane considered this for a long moment. Acceptable, he said finally. The 3-day courtship will begin at the start of the next cycle. I will arrange appropriate accommodations and supervision. He paused, fixing Marcus with a stern look. Do not mistake my agreement for approval, human. I am allowing this because Kytherian law requires it, not because I believe it is wise. I understand, Marcus said. But I hope by the end of 3 days, you'll see that I'm not just some reckless human looking for an exotic experience. I'm someone who genuinely wants to understand what this connection might mean. As Thane departed with warnings about proper behavior and diplomatic protocols, Marcus found himself alone with Zara again. She was looking at him with those mesmerizing eyes, her skin cycling through soft, warm colors. Thank you, she said quietly. For not simply walking away. Thank you for not wanting me to, Marcus replied. Though I have to ask, are you sure about this? 3 days is a long time to spend with someone you just met. Zara's lips curved into a genuine smile, revealing those light-catching teeth. In Kytherian culture, we believe that the taste bond reveals truths that might take months or years to discover through conventional courtship. When I sampled your essence, I tasted courage, kindness, curiosity, and a loneliness that matches my own. Marcus felt his breath catch. Loneliness? I have spent my life surrounded by people who see me as the regent's niece first, Zara second, she said. You looked at me and saw me. That is rarer than you might think. As they made their way back through the station, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn into completely uncharted territory. 3 days to explore a connection with an alien woman who could taste his emotions, supervised by a disapproving uncle who could end the whole thing with a word. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Marcus found himself more excited than he'd been in years. The first day of their courtship began in the Kytherian cultural quarter of Nexus Prime, where crystalline gardens grew in impossible spirals and the air itself seemed to shimmer with bioluminescent particles. Marcus walked beside Zara, acutely aware of Thane's watchful presence 3 steps behind them, along with 2 other Kytherian guards who maintained a respectful but obvious distance. This is where we meditate, Zara explained, gesturing to a grove of translucent trees that chimed softly in harmonious tones as the station's air currents moved through their hollow branches. The resonance helps us achieve emotional balance. Marcus listened to the ethereal music, feeling something in his chest relax in response to the sound. It's beautiful. How does it work? The trees respond to bioelectric fields, she said, her skin shifting to a warm golden hue as she spoke. Each person's emotional state creates a different harmonic. When Kytherians meditate together, our combined fields create complex symphonies. What would mine sound like? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Zara glanced back at her uncle, who nodded curtly. Step closer to the grove, she instructed. As Marcus approached the singing trees, their chimes shifted, becoming deeper and more resonant. The harmony took on new complexity, weaving through frequencies that seemed to vibrate in his bones. Several passing Kytherians stopped to listen, their expressions showing surprise and something that might have been approval. Remarkable, Thane murmured, his stern expression softening slightly. Your bioelectric signature is unusually harmonious for a non-Kytherian. Is that good or bad? Marcus asked, stepping back as the trees returned to their original song. Good, Zara said, her skin now cycling through pleased purples and golds. Very good. It suggests deep emotional stability and natural empathy. They spent the morning exploring the Kytherian quarter, with Zara explaining the significance of various cultural artifacts and practices. Marcus found himself fascinated not just by the alien beauty of her people's customs, but by the way Zara's face lit up when she talked about things she was passionate about. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and he caught himself smiling more than he had in months. Now, Marcus said as they paused for lunch at a small cafe that served both human and Kytherian cuisine, it's my turn to share. But first, I need to ask you something. Zara tilted her head in that endearing way. Yes. Your friend, Marcus said, nodding toward the cafe's entrance where a human woman had just walked in. The one who's been following us all morning, trying to look casual. Zara's skin flushed silver with embarrassment. That is. I may have mentioned our situation to someone. The woman in question had wild curly hair dyed in shades of blue and green, with clothing that suggested she was either an artist or someone who had never met a regulation she couldn't creatively interpret. She approached their table with a grin that was equal parts mischievous and delighted. You must be the human who accidentally proposed to my friend, she said, extending a hand to Marcus. I'm Nick Starweaver, professional troublemaker and Zara's partner in crime. Marcus Webb, he replied, shaking her hand and noting the calluses that suggested she worked with her hands. And I think she proposed to me, technically. Nix laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Oh, I like him already. Zara, you didn't tell me he had a sense of humor. Nix, Zara said, her tone warning but fond, you are supposed to be working. I am working, Nix replied, sliding into the seat next to Marcus despite Thane's disapproving stare. I'm a cultural exchange facilitator. This counts as cultural exchange. She turned to Marcus. So, what's your story? What makes a human maintenance engineer worth breaking centuries of Kytherian tradition? Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I'm not sure I am worth it. I'm curious about Zara's world, and I hope she's curious about mine. Oh, she is, Nick said with a knowing smile. She's been asking me about human customs for the past 6 months. Particularly about human courtship rituals. Nix. Zara's skin flashed bright silver with embarrassment. What? It's true. You've been fascinated by human culture since the first delegation arrived. Nix turned back to Marcus. Did you know that Kytherians typically court for years before bonding? The fact that she taste-tested you within minutes of meeting you is unprecedented. Marcus looked at Zara, who was now staring intently at her untouched meal. Is that true? Perhaps, she said quietly. But your bioelectric signature was so compelling, I acted on instinct rather than protocol. And now? Marcus asked gently. Zara's eyes met his, and he saw uncertainty there, mixed with something deeper. Now I find myself wondering what it would be like to explore that instinct further. Thane cleared his throat pointedly. Perhaps we should continue the tour. The cultural exchange halls are quite informative. But Marcus had an idea. Actually, I was hoping to show Zara something from my world. If that's acceptable. What did you have in mind? Thane asked suspiciously. The observation deck during the dinner shift, Marcus said. I want to show her how humans appreciate beauty. An hour later, they stood in the station's main observation deck, which Marcus had somehow convinced the duty officer to dim to minimal lighting. Through the massive viewport, the cosmos spread before them in all its glory, distant nebulae painting the darkness in shades of pink and gold, star clusters that looked like scattered diamonds, and the slow dance of nearby planets around their sun. This is how humans court, Marcus said softly, standing close enough to Zara that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. We share beauty. We find places that make us feel small and connected to something larger than ourselves. Zara's skin shifted to deep purples and golds, colors that seemed to echo the cosmic display before them. It's magnificent, she whispered. I have seen space many times, but never like this. What makes it different? Marcus asked. The context, she said, turning to look at him. Sharing it with someone who sees wonder in the same things I do. Behind them, even Thane had fallen silent, though Marcus could feel the older Kytherian's watchful presence. On Earth, Marcus continued, we have a tradition of making wishes on falling stars. We believe that if you see a meteor and make a wish before it burns out, the wish might come true. What would you wish for? Zara asked, her voice barely audible. Marcus looked at her, taking in the way the starlight caught in her silver hair, the gentle glow of her skin, the galaxies swirling in her eyes. Right now? I'd wish for time. Time to really understand what this connection between us means. Zara's breath caught, and her skin cycled through colors Marcus was beginning to recognize as deep emotion. Marcus. I know it's crazy, he said quickly. We barely know each other, we're from different worlds, literally, and there are about a dozen political reasons why this is a bad idea. But when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The taste bond, Zara said slowly, it allows me to sense your emotional state. Right now, I can feel your sincerity, your wonder, your... She paused, her skin flushing with silver, your attraction to me. And what do you feel? Marcus asked, his heart racing. Terrified, she admitted. Exhilarated. More alive than I have ever been. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns of silver that traced across her skin. In my culture, we have a saying, trust the taste of the soul. When I sampled your essence, I tasted something I have been searching for without knowing it. What was that? Home, she said simply. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that went deeper than attraction or curiosity. Zara, Enough, Thane's voice cut through the moment like a blade. This display is highly inappropriate for a first day of courtship. Marcus turned to see the older Kytherian approaching, his expression stern but not unkind. Sir, I meant no disrespect. I know what you meant, Thane said. But you must understand, human, that Kytherian courtship is a delicate process. Emotional bonds that form too quickly can be unstable, dangerous even. Uncle, Zara said, her voice gaining strength, you speak as if I am a child who cannot judge her own heart. I speak as someone who has seen the consequences of hasty bonding decisions, Thane replied. The taste bond is sacred, but it is also just the beginning. True compatibility must be tested, proven over time. Then let us prove it, Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness. Give us the full 3 days. Let us explore this connection properly, with whatever supervision you require. Thane studied him for a long moment. You would truly commit to this process? Understanding that if the bond proves genuine, it will change your life irrevocably? Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with an intensity that made his skin tingle. I would. And you, niece? Thane asked. Are you prepared for the consequences of a true bonding with a human? You would be the first of our people to attempt such a union. Zara's skin shifted to determined gold. I am. Thane nodded slowly. Then tomorrow, we begin the deeper tests. But know this, the second day of courtship will reveal whether your connection is based on genuine compatibility or merely novelty and attraction. As they made their way back through the station, Nyx fell into step beside Marcus. Fair warning, she said quietly. Tomorrow is going to be intense. Kytherian courtship tests are designed to reveal every aspect of a person's character, good and bad. What kind of tests? Marcus asked. The kind that will show whether you can handle the reality of loving someone whose emotions you can taste, whose pain becomes your pain, whose joy becomes your joy. Nyx's expression grew serious. Bonding with a Kytherian isn't like human marriage, Marcus. It's a melding of souls. Are you sure you're ready for that? Marcus watched Zara walking ahead of them, her silver hair catching the station's lights, her graceful movements somehow both alien and familiar. I'm sure I want to find out, he said. Good answer, Nyx replied with a smile. Though I should warn you, Thane has something special planned for tomorrow. Something that will test both of your resolves. What do you mean? Nyx's smile turned mischievous. Let's just say you're going to meet someone who will make you question everything you think you know about this bond. As they reached the intersection where their paths would diverge, Zara turned back to Marcus. Thank you, she said softly. For sharing your stars with me. Thank you for letting me share them, Marcus replied. She stepped closer, and for a moment, he thought she might taste him again. Instead, she placed her hand over his heart, and he felt that familiar tingle of bioelectric current. Tomorrow, she said, we discover whether this is real. Marcus covered her hand with his, feeling the warmth of her skin through the tingling energy. I already know it is. Tomorrow, we just prove it to everyone else. As he watched her walk away with her uncle and the guards, Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. 1 day down, 2 to go. And somehow, he suspected the hardest tests were still ahead of them. But looking up at the stars visible through the station's viewports, he found himself making a wish anyway. Not for time, as he'd told Zara, but for the courage to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Because despite the warnings, despite the complications, despite the impossibility of it all, he was falling in love with an alien woman who had tasted his soul and found it worthy. The question was, would their bond survive the trials ahead?